Welcome, and thank you so much for joining the World Affairs Council of Connecticut this evening for a special young professional discussion. Before we dive into tonight's conversation, I do just want to take a step back and quickly at first acknowledge that today is a momentous day here in the US with the verdict delivery in the trial of Derek Chauvin. By this point, I'm sure we've all seen the jury's verdict just about an hour ago of guilty on all counts. This is an important day for accountability here in the US, an important step in the path of creating a more just and free nation. And before we dive into the discussion, I just wanted to take a moment to share that with us all and just acknowledge that moment. So with that acknowledgement, I also want to thank everyone for being here with us tonight to discuss sports diplomacy and how sports can be used as a tool to bridge nations and communities. So we're thrilled to be joined by two very special guests this evening. Dr. Ashleigh Huffman, Program Specialist in the Sports Diplomacy Division at the U.S. Department of State, and Kerry McCoy, two-time U.S. Olympian, 2008 Olympic coach, two-time NCAA Division I national champion, and current secretary of the USA Wrestling Board of Directors. Dr. Huffman, Kerry, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Yeah, you're so welcome. I want two-time Olympian after my name, Kerry. That's what I need.
Hey, you got plenty of time. We got a games coming up in a couple of weeks, so get on it.
Well, I'll be headed straight to training right after the conclusion of this discussion.
There you go.
My name is Amanda Jolliet, for everyone out there, VP of Programs at the Council. And let's dive in. I'm pleased to turn it over to this evening's moderator and leader of the Council's Young Professionals Program, Schaefer, Virtual Communications Specialist here at the Council. Caroline?
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you for that introduction and those comments. And of course, welcome Dr. Huffman and Kerry. We are so happy to have you tonight to talk about sports diplomacy. I want to just start off with kind of introductions. Obviously, from what we've already heard, you both have such interesting backgrounds in this space. So can you just both give a brief background on how you got involved in the world of sports, also at an international level? And Dr. Huffman, we can start with you.
Okay, sure. I grew up in a really small town in West Virginia, population 800. And so for me, I played sports because my dad played sports, and my dad I wanted to be everything that he was. You know, he's an amazing man, a superhero without a cape. And so he played basketball, football, baseball, and ran track. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be just like him. So, you know, as it typically goes in a small town during that time, I was the only girl on a lot of all boys teams. But even though that was a challenge at times, I feel like it really pushed me to be better, that I became a better basketball player, a better communicator, a better leader, a better friend, a better teammate as a result of being the only or the one or the first girl in that town to play. And I eventually went on to play collegiate basketball at Eastern Kentucky University, and then went on to get my master's and PhD at the University of Tennessee because I wanted to work with the legend, Pat Summitt. And so I learned a lot of great things from her in terms of authenticity and toughness and compassion. And I think she's as real as it gets. And she inspired me to continue to empower women through sports globally from her example of generosity and creating access and pathways for girls all over the world. And so for me, it was that moment. It was basketball. Basketball was my passport to see the world. And it was Pat Summitt who was my role model. And I was lucky enough to grow up in a time where I had female role models and my dad. So that's how I got involved.
Thank you. And Kerry?
Oh, well, I think you're going to say this a bunch of times. That's a tough act to follow. So I don't have anything as inspiring as that of where I got started. I was a bored kid. 7th grade was the first year that we could play interscholastic sports, and the only teams that were available were wrestling and track and field. And I had a buddy of mine that wrestled from 5 years old, and he said, "Why don't you come out for wrestling?" And kid you not, only wrestling that I knew was Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. So that's what I thought it was. So I was pretty fired up. I was a big fan of it, and that's what I thought I was getting into. Little did I know it was nothing like that. And the one thing I say all the time when I talk about it, I fell in love with the sport. First day of practice, I walked in, coach said start running, and I'm like, wait a minute, I thought track starts in the spring. But I fell in love with the sport right away, and I knew it was something I was going to do for a long time. And I didn't set out to be a state champ, a national champ, an Olympian. That I wanted to get better. And I was so bad when I started that, it was really easy. I say I was a team confidence booster. And, if anybody was having a bad day, coach say, go wrestle McCoy, you feel better about yourself. So that's how my career started. And then eventually I started getting better and improving and, had some success. Went on to college, graduated from Penn State where, I wrestled and had some pretty good time, good seasons, good competitive results. And during that transition from high school to college, I always was surrounded by, international wrestling. There were posters in our room. And I remember there were two things that really spurred me to think about the Olympic level. One, there was a picture of Kenny Monday, who was our first Black Olympic champion in 1988. And then John Smith, who won 6 straight world championships. And they were standing, and in the middle was a white polar bear with the Soviet Union sickle on his arm. And it was an American bald eagle with his claws in the bear's chest. And the saying on the poster was, taking the heart out of the competition. And I didn't really realize how, big of a global reach it had. But the idea was like, these guys, are the best of the best. I saw it every day and I wanted to get there. So, probably between my junior, senior year in high school, I said, hey, I want to be an Olympian, and started working towards that. And that's how it goes. The other poster that I saw, and this is a big thing with inclusion, is Nate Carr was another African-American. He was an Olympic bronze medalist. There was a picture of him and he was sweaty after work, all jacked up, all his muscles bulging. And he said, I don't do steroids, so you shouldn't either. And so like the idea of competing at the high level, competing for your country, taking the heart out of the competition, but then also doing it clean was something that was instilled in me a long time. And that really led my path to compete individually, and then wanted to give back is why I started to coach and continue to serve today. So that's how we got going.
Thank you. I mean, I think that everyone would agree. They wish that they could just decide one day, I want to be an Olympian. And obviously there's a ton of work that goes into that, but that's amazing. So thank you guys. Dr. Huffman, I want to turn it back to you to kind of discuss, like, just on a basic level, what is sports diplomacy according to the State Department? And why did you get involved in this work at the federal level?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, I think sports diplomacy is the best kept secret of our federal government. I think we're a small but mighty team of 7, and we work in every region of the world. And we use sport really from the grassroots to the ministerial level and our slogan is, we move people on exchanges to shift ideas that really transform policies. And so we're moving people globally to meet one another, peer to peer, or athlete to young person, to be inspired. And so it's really about these people to people connections that help build relationships between our countries, that break down some of these barriers, that allow us to talk about hard things, that help us find a universal ground to stand on, and how we're more alike than different. We use that through sport. As athletes, it doesn't matter. We can go to a field in Uganda, or we can go to, an island in the Philippines. And if we roll out a basketball or a soccer ball, people know what to do with it. And it's very low cost, high impact. And so that's the power of sport. That's why we use it as a government, is really to connect us.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, obviously this isn't about me, but I played field hockey. And I think I can confirm, though, if you gave a field hockey stick to most people, it wouldn't be the same reaction. But I agree, sports is that kind of global language that everyone speaks. And speaking of the global aspect, I want to talk about things like the Olympics and these international competitions that kind of every country in the world is united behind. So again, I want to address both of you with this question. Do you think that sports have the ability to serve as sort of a soft power tactic between nations? I think a great example of this too is what we're seeing right now with the Super League proposed in the European Union with soccer, right? There's European governments are getting involved in this world of sports, and it's kind of creating this crazy conflict. So in your opinion, do you think that this can create can facilitate change between nations or no?
Yeah, sure. It's when you mentioned that, the first thing that popped in my head, obviously Olympics it's the one time, maybe not the one time, that it doesn't matter where you're from, doesn't matter who you are, like, we're under the Olympic flag. Now, everybody wants to compete at the high level, they're pursuing that goal, but you can go into the cafeteria in the Olympic Village, and you see hundreds of people from all different nations, and they're there together, and they're existing, you know, and it's under that flag of sport. A few years ago, there's a great shot. Jordan Burroughs was an Olympic champion in 2012, and there was a lot of tension, you know, obviously as it's been through Russia, Iran, and the United States. And there's a picture of Jordan Burroughs, and he had his jacket, and it says United States of America, and he's got his arm around the Iranian wrestler. And this was, you know, right when tensions were pretty high between U.S. and Iran. So the word was in this, you know, with everything else going on in the world, the fact that the United States, Russia, and Iran can come together over the sport of wrestling. If they can come together in wrestling, then they should be able to find a way to come together in other areas. So that's something that just popped in my mind, and how that goes, and bringing everyone together under this flag of sport. And it's still, there's competitiveness. You want to go out and pursue greatness. You want to go out and try to be the best you can be. But it's under that flag of sport of, you know, sportsmanship and shaking hands, and, you know, all that type of stuff is really what it's about. And I think that that's how you can bring the nations together.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I can visualize that picture in my mind. It's an important one, and especially the sport of wrestling in so many areas where where those countries are historically really good, and there are places where we want to be, and we want to develop diplomatic relations, and we would like to heal that relationship in so many of those places. And I think wrestling is a unique way to do that. And I think that mega events like the Olympics, well, first of all, they capture the attention of the world, right? Everyone's watching the World Cup, the Olympics, the Paralympics, you know, all eyes on that moment. And it's the underdog story. It's the inspiration. It's, you know, to see people become their very best, but be able to still respect each other. It's this emotional cauldron where the stakes are really high and the consequences are real, but at the same time, it reveals who you are as a human being. And so I think it's like the one place that you can actually test your emotions and in practice for real life. You know, so I think that mega events are really important if they can be more than a one-off, if we can create programs around that. As you see with like the Olympics coming to LA in 2028, it's a really important moment for our country to create some youth programs for LA, for California and beyond, to talk about diversity, inclusion, access, justice. All of those things are mental health, homelessness, the border, everything that's happening right now. This is a moment in time where there is money designated for our country to implement something that has a legacy beyond the games. And I think it's the games plus, it's the games plus programs that really make a difference. And so, you know, what can we do? How can we take advantage of United 2026 World Cup being in our back door? How can we take advantage of LA 2028? And those are the kinds of conversations we're having at state, is how do we take something that already exists that's so powerful, and the values like Olympism are so important, and how do we use that to really create things that are more sustainable?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the community building aspects of sports and inclusion aspects of sports, which are obviously extremely important. But I do have a question from the audience, and it's referring to the documentary Icarus, and how that is a great example of the security and diplomatic ramifications of doping in sports. So I don't know if you guys have any insight of how do doping regulations impact sports diplomacy and global relations, or even just the sporting world itself?
Yeah, that's a really basic question that can get really complicated, right? Because, you know, the idea is you want to compete clean. Like I said, when I was introduced to the sport at the high level, right? Nate Carr, I don't do steroids, you shouldn't do it. Then there have been so many athletes that, you know, been put on a pedestal, and you come to find out that they were doping. So it really tarnishes their reputation. The competitive side of athletes, they want to go out and they want to beat their competition. And if their competition is cheating and they don't get a chance to compete against that competitor, something gets taken away from that competitive experience. So even if they were cheating, you still want a chance to compete against them. So it's really an interesting thing, because obviously you say, boom, you don't do it the right way, you shouldn't be able to participate. But especially in the sport of wrestling, right? When they talked about the Russians not competing in the Olympics, you know, the US wants to compete against them because they're the best team in the world, right? So you want to have a chance to go out and beat the best, you know, and they're not competing clean. You know, that's one of those things that really is a tough thing to deal, because you still want to compete, but you don't want to have someone with an advantage, but same time, hey, I'm good enough. Even if you have an advantage, I'm going to beat you. So that's kind of like that really interesting dichotomy with anti-doping. But got to compete clean, and that'll make everything a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. I get it too, the competitive side of that. Like, hey, even if you are cheating, I'll still win. Dr. Huffman, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of expand on the Sports Envoy program at the State Department and what the goal of this program is. I know we might be recruiting Kerry for that program.
100% we are. Yeah, so I'm happy to talk about Sports Envoys. I actually co-manage this portfolio for our team, and it's really about responding to the directives put out by the White House. So whatever our foreign policy priorities are, those things go out through the Secretary of State. And I would say, some of our staples are women's empowerment, disability rights and inclusion. Environmentalism is a new one under this administration. Previously, entrepreneurship was really important under the last administration. Refugees and migration is very important. And then, obviously the topic of race is timely for everyone right now. And what does that look like in terms of reconciliation, peace building, violent extremism? So kind of under that umbrella of where are the fault lines in society? How are they breaking, and how do we reconcile? And so those directives come out through the White House, and then our embassies submit proposals to our headquarters in DC, and they say, okay, after taking a look at the local situation, here's something that we want to try to target. We want to do gender-based violence prevention using the sport of boxing in Kenya. Can you find us a male boxer and a female boxer, and we're going to do some kind of boxing program around this initiative. So then we work with the leagues and federations here in the States to find athletes like Kerry, who are awesome people, who could speak to this subject, who are phenomenal athletes, and they go out and they meet with the communities. They do hands-on clinics. They typically meet with the Ministry of Youth or the Ministry of Sport. And so when people like Kerry go to a country, it automatically draws the media, it draws, it opens up doors for our embassy where maybe doors have previously been closed. So if you're going to Iran or Russia or China or somewhere as a sports envoy, then suddenly we're able to access, the meeting room because of this phenomenal athlete. And right or wrong, that's how it goes. And, it gives them a chance also as athletes, as everyday Americans, to be able to speak about what the lived experience looks like. No holds bar, like just give it to us straight, so that people can have a face-to-face encounter with a real life champion, but then also a real life American who's living here and can tell us what it's actually like to be an American and what we hold true. And so that's the Sports Envoy program. Typically, we recruit 60 athletes per year to go to 30 countries. So we pair people up, typically male and female, to just try to maintain gender balance. And and then we send them to 30 countries to do sport plus a foreign policy priority.
Thank you. Yeah, it's such an interesting program. And like you kind of said, a best kept secret. And I think it's really, really interesting. And I want to continue on this road of community building and inclusion in sports, because you both have a really robust background in this area and fighting for equality within sports, whether that's gender, race, with disability, even with the hierarchy of like the importance people place on certain sports. I don't know if both of you guys want to address the question of what kind of experiences you've had that demonstrate the ability of sports to integrate communities or overcome division in our national society or around the world. Kerry, if we can start with you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the one, when I was thinking about it, the USOPC, US Olympic and Paralympic Committee, has recently loosened the rules around, it's called Rule 50, basically, personal expression, demonstration, protest. And, under the Olympic flag, there is no protesting allowed, right? So you think back to Tommy Smith and John Carlos with, in the Olympics when they were on the podium, and then 2016, a couple athletes at the Olympics, they kneeled on the podium, or, in Pan American Championships. So there were different things, and all those athletes were punished, suspended, all that. And now we're at a place where you can have expression. Now there's still some guidelines, right? But now you can express yourself, and it's a great way, because like you say, when these athletes on these huge platforms, they take a stand, they make a statement, it can have so much more of a powerful draw and a powerful effect on communities at large, their own communities outside. People can see something and say, well, what's going on? I can ask questions. If I'm angry about it, let me ask questions, let me find out more. But it starts a conversation, gets people talking about whatever the issue is, whatever side they're on. So I think that's a huge part of being able to build a community, because now you're having those conversations. The more conversation that you have, then the likelihood more people are going to be more educated, more informed. And as that continues to grow, then hopefully as a society, we do better. So I think that's really the big thing, is being able to have that platform and express yourself. And the fact that USOPC is allowing that on the elite level is such a huge step. And I'm excited for this upcoming games and future games.
For sure. I mean, it is a moment because, there was such blowback from 1968, Mexico City, when that happened. So to progress to now is interesting. I will say from my work, I used to be a professor before I started at the State Department, and I started a Center for Sport, Peace, and Society. So we talk about the role of sport in peace building. I've seen a couple of examples over my time, and it's been incredible to watch the power of sport bring people together. And so I guess something that probably really stands out to me in my mind, there are many examples from other countries that I've been to, for sure, but something that I'm really proud of and really had a profound impact on my heart. I used to teach a service learning class for students, and we worked with the refugee community in Knoxville, and the majority of refugees were from Iraq. So from Baghdad to Knoxville, Tennessee, big jump. And so just how do you integrate into society? How do you, we had 3,000 families in 1 year come to Knoxville. And in 3 months, you have to enroll in school, learn the language, find a job, find a place to live, figure out so many things. And it's a very underfunded, understaffed kind of situation. There were 3 caseworkers for 3,000 people. And so I started a service learning class where we could get the university behind it and to support, the families in their integration process, to help them fill out FAFSA forms, to help them look for jobs. Yes, they came and they were engineers and mathematicians and physicists, and the jobs were not equivalent to that. And that was very frustrating. But at the same time, there was a dignity behind the experience, because university students were reaching out to them, inviting them to places, helping them enroll in, graduate programs, and helping their kids go to school, and tutoring them, and taking them and coaching them, putting them in sports. I mean, that was amazing to see my students coach refugee children in sports. And it was powerful. And I can remember at the end of the 3rd year, there was this woman, Sharifa, who I just love. And she said, this class really taught me a different side of America, because over there, I was so excited to get here, and because I didn't want to die. But I came here and I wasn't living until this class started. And it wasn't as scary to me after I made friends. There was this bridge between us through this class. And I think I'll always remember that, as how scary it must be to live in another country, and that even though you were being bombed over there, you came here and you still weren't living. And I think that was the power of sport, is that, we could connect over soccer and fitness and health and wellness, and make really beautiful, lasting relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. That is really powerful, and is that a true testament to the power of athletics. And then Kerry, I want to switch it over to you, because you are one of the founding members of the Black Wrestling Association, which was founded in 2020 to create a representative platform for the Black wrestling community. Can you tell us a little bit more about this organization and its goals for the wrestling community and the broader community at large?
Yeah, thanks. This is ironically enough, we're talking about this on the day of the, Chauvin verdict. So, and that was really the impetus of how this organization got started. 2 of our founding members, Nate Jackson and Kyvan Gatson, who are elite level athletes, when it happened, they got together and they were talking to each other, and they just kind of had this sense of hopelessness. Doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter how, this could happen to me. And on a specific, on an individual scale, but on a broader scale, that what's happened in our society. So we got a couple of guys together, and it grew and grew. We had about 40 plus, Black male wrestlers that were on a Zoom call. And it was really start off as just kind of a support, just to share your stories and to support each other. And then after that call, it's like, hey, we need to do something else. We don't just, need to have a support group. We want to go further. So we turned an organization. We had 11 founding members and came up, did a strategic plan. And our focus is not just on the Black community. It's Black wrestlers and allies, right? So, we look at it, it's we want to inspire, we want to connect, we want to empower through representation, and giving an opportunity for, like I said, when I talk about my story, when I looked in John Smith and Kenny Monday, so there was a white wrestler and a Black wrestler that I was looking to, and then Nate Carr was a Black wrestler. So I had that picture in my mind that I could do it at that highest level. And it wasn't necessarily just looking at the color of skin, but knowing that someone like me can do that. And there's so many times that you come up in activities where you don't see someone that looks like you. So it makes it that much more of a challenge to get into it, or, let alone stay into it. So that's what we want to do. We want to inspire all aspects of our sport of wrestlers to be able to be successful as competitors, to create opportunities for coaching, for administrative positions, and just continue to inspire and connect. And, the biggest thing is that, little boys and girls can look up and see, Jordan Burroughs is an Olympic champ, Kenny Money is an Olympic champ, Takara Montgomery, who's the first Black female wrestler to compete in the Olympics, right? And have these stories that they can look to and build up. And, as you said earlier, Dr. Huffman said, she was like, being the first, being the only, that's still what we're going through. But eventually we want to get to the point where it's not, right? You're not the first female, you're not the first Black, you're not the first, whatever descriptive demographic you want to put on there, right? So for us in the Black community, for wrestlers, we want to make sure that the younger generation and the older generation can look back and be inspired, because there's activity that's going to help us inspire and connect our community and really make a difference. So it's been pretty cool. We're approaching our 1 year anniversary, and we're looking to do some pretty good things, but we've got a pretty good following, and we've had some pretty good ideas on what we can do next. But it's just awesome to be a part of something like that that's going to have a legacy, far beyond just the individuals that started it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we're coming up on our time a little bit, but I want to end us on kind of a hopeful note, hopefully. But with the kind of disunity we've talked about, and inequality in the US and around the world, do you guys see that, or do you think that participation in sports is more important than ever before? Like, can it be used? I know we've talked about the unifying power, but do you think that participation at all ages, not just youth, but at all ages, has never been more important, and why?
Yes, I do think it's more important now than ever. I feel like we have so many challenges in our society, from social isolation to cyberbullying to all of the things. I have a 9-year-old niece, and I just see the things that she's exposed to and how different her life is than mine was. And, wow, it's hard. And I think after a year of a pandemic, year and a half, and we're still in it, just the drop off, the decrease, the lack of interest in youth sports by so many. I mean, you see the decline because it wasn't safe. And now it's like, well, I don't really know if I want to go back to it, because I could just play this video game for 14 hours until tomorrow morning. And I'm worried. I'm worried that we're going to raise a generation that can't communicate, that doesn't feel, that doesn't understand how to be part of something bigger than themselves, that it's going to be all of this isolation, me and my own world and my game and my technology and my whatever. And I feel like if we don't break that right now, it's going to be very challenging 20 years from now. I'm not saying technology is bad. I think there are a lot of great benefits, but I'm saying the addictive properties of it and the lack of conversation, teamwork, achieving a goal together, like those things are really important. And you can only really learn those in one way, at least for me in my life, and that was through sport.
It's a great thing to bring out, because I feel like, just like anything else, right? If you talk about it, then it becomes easier. It becomes a gateway to actually do something about it. And the one thing that I've focused on immensely through this, last year is the idea of family, right? Because we were, for the most part, locked inside with our family for so long. So you got to know, and how much you really like that other person, and whether it's your sibling, whether it's your spouse, whether it's significant other. So the bigger picture of that is that's what sport is, right? Sport is your family. And when you have that opportunity to interact, you go to practice every day, and if you got someone that's a better athlete, a better performer, better whatever, and they're just crushing you every day. And, that one day you might get a little bit of an edge, you may have a good day, and, it feels so good. And the other side of when, you are having a rough day, when your teammates, your family picks you up and helps you get through that, or at the end of practice, you're running sprints and everyone's cheering for you, to get that last one, even if you're the slowest, least athletic, least in shape person out there. And, they might just want to hurry up and cheer you on so they can be finished, but there's cheering going, there's excitement. So those are the type of things that, that sport really bring. And if you are feeling down, if you are feeling up, you're feeling one way or the other, you can really lean on your teammates and have that family aspect. And I know for me, throughout my competitive career, between my teammates, between my coaches, and I had a lot of times, I mentioned before, getting into the sport, I didn't have very many people in my family that were into wrestling, into sports overall. So that connection came from my family, came from my team, came from my coaches. And it was just awesome to be able to have that group and then have my family at home that could be, similar characteristics, but really be a different experience. So that's where I really think about where sport can make a big difference, because you have that pseudo family. And there is, we got that big brother that always picks on us and makes life miserable. So you got, maybe you're a freshman, there's a senior on the team, or, you got a hard coach that's really going, maybe that's where your parents were. So you get, all those aspects, but the difference is you get to choose, to participate in sports and have that experience. And then you can really develop and dictate where you're going to go with that experience. So I think that's the big thing that sports will do to help uplift, regardless of what you're going in. I mean, you strap on your running shoes and go out there and, hit the road. Everything else kind of goes away for that time. And, when you're in the gym, it's just like you're just focused on that. So being able to do that on an individual basis is great. But when you can do it with, 5, 10, 15, 20 other people, it's such an uplifting thing. And that's really what sport means. And I think that's how we can, conquer anything through sport.
Yeah, thank you. And I think what you guys both touched upon, which was one of my biggest takeaways as an athlete too, is, very few people start at the top. And, you're starting at the bottom, and the people who are better than you, it's what motivates you to get better. And beyond that, like you were saying, Kerry, on the field or on the court or on the mat, it might be, your teammate seems like your worst enemy, but afterwards, it's just all in kind of the spirit of the sport and in the community that you're in. So I think those are all excellent points. And thank you guys so much.
For sure. Nice to meet you, Kerry. I'll be in touch.
Yeah.
You've been recruited. Consider yourself.
I've been recruited. Yeah. Look forward to it. I haven't been recruited in a long time, so I'm kind of excited. Do I get to sign?
I'll echo Caroline in saying a huge thank you so much to both of you. Thank you, Dr. Huffman. Thank you, Kerry. Thank you, Caroline.